Good evening, I'm Marlowe. Welcome to Marlowe's Evening Radio. For those still awake at this hour, the broadcast begins. Tonight, I'm opening one of the stories that has reached the night archives. From time to time, accounts arrive there with no clear origin. Some come from distant worlds, some from other times, and some from places whose names have never been spoken here before. In each episode, I take one of those accounts from the archives and read it here. Tonight's story comes from Ash Valley, a quiet place between ash-covered mountains where dragons are not hunted or feared, but sheltered, tended, and watched over through the night. This account is based on what was shared by the night keeper of the lower dragon shelter. Settle in. We begin. I have kept the night watch at the lower dragon shelter for longer than I usually count. In Ash Valley, people do not measure a life only by years. We measure it by winters of ashfall, by the number of young dragons we have seen learn to sleep through thunder, by the cracks in the old stone floors, and by how well a person can tell the difference between a restless breath and a dreaming one. The lower shelter sits beneath the eastern ridge, where the valley begins to narrow and the mountains lean inward. From above it must look very small. A dark line of roof tiles, a few stone chimneys, a yard for water troughs, and the long curved wall that keeps the cold wind from moving straight through the sleeping hall. But from the inside, at night, it feels much larger. It feels like a place built around breathing. There are no towers here, no banners for kings, no carved gates made to impress travelers. The shelter was made for quieter things. Wide doorways, low warm floors, deep stalls lined with heat stones, hooks for brushes and harness cloths, shelves for ash herbs, and small lamps set close to the ground so the light does not bother the young one's eyes. People from outside the valley sometimes imagine a dragon shelter as a dangerous place. They think of iron cages and shouting handlers, of long spears and heavy locks. They imagine that those of us who work here must be brave in a loud and obvious way. But the work is not like that. Most nights, courage is only knowing how to stand still. Most nights, my task is to notice what changes before it becomes a problem. A tail drawn too tightly around a body. A wing folded at the wrong angle. A breath that comes half a moment too quickly. A water trough left too full, catching reflections it should not catch. A lantern turned too bright. A chain hook tapping against stone in a rhythm that might keep a young dragon awake. The lower shelter is for dragons not yet old enough for the upper caverns and not young enough for the nursery fires. They are large enough to shake the roof beams when they dream, but still young enough to fear the shapes their own smoke makes on the wall. Some have only recently learned not to wake themselves with their own sparks. Some still sleep with one eye open when the wind moves under the door. I know their habits, but I do not command them. That is one of the first things a keeper learns in Ash Valley. A dragon may listen to you if it trusts your footsteps. It may follow you if it understands your silence, but it is never yours. Not in the way a bucket is yours, or a coat, or a key. A dragon belongs first to its own breath, then to the sky it remembers, and only after that to the place where it rests. So I keep the shelter ready. That is my place in the valley. I am not one of the high keepers who tend the ancient dragons in the upper stone halls. I am not one of the egg watchers who sit beside the warm nests before dawn and listen for the first tapping from inside the shells. I am not one of the flight callers who stand on the western cliffs and read the winds with bright flags and ash-blackened hands. I keep the lower shelter through the night. I light what needs lighting. I dim what needs dimming. I carry water. I sweep ash from the narrow paths between the heat stones. I mend small straps, soften cracked leather, count the bundles of ash herb, and listen for changes in the dark. There are 13 stalls in the lower shelter, though rarely are all 13 filled. The old builders believed in leaving space for weather, grief, and unexpected arrivals. That is what the first keeper wrote, at least. His words are still carved above the back passage, though the ash has softened the edges. Leave room for what the valley brings. I pass those words every night. Sometimes the valley brings nothing more than a cold draft and a quiet row of sleeping bodies. Sometimes it brings a restless young dragon with smoke in its throat. Sometimes it brings a creature too tired to fly another mile. Sometimes it brings a memory, though memories are harder to sweep from the floor. At night, I belong to the shelter. I know which floor stones hold warmth longest. I know which hinge complains when the air turns damp. I know the third lantern from the south door must be turned lower than the rest, because its glass is old and throws a trembling shape across the wall. I know where the ash gathers in small drifts, even when the doors are shut. I know the smell of wet scale, dry smoke, tired leather, and cooling stone. These are not grand things to know, but they are useful. And in Ash Valley, useful knowledge is often passed quietly hand to hand without ceremony. The older keepers taught me by pointing, by pausing, by letting me listen until I heard what they heard. No one ever said, "This is how you care for a dragon." They said, "Stand here. Wait. Breathe more slowly. Now listen again." That is how most of the work is learned. Not from books, not from rules, from standing in the same place long enough for the place to begin speaking in small ways. The dragons speak in small ways too, though not with words. A sleeping dragon tells you a great deal if you do not rush to understand it. The slow pull of its ribs, the heat around its nostrils, the soft ticking sounds some make when their throat stones cool, the way one claw opens and closes when it dreams of flying, the faint color inside the smoke. If this account has found its way into the archives, perhaps it is because I wanted someone, somewhere, to know that in Ash Valley, dragons are not always seen in the sky. Sometimes they are seen sleeping beside low lamps, with ash on their wings and dreams moving slowly under their scales. Sometimes the great old stories are not about battle or flame. Sometimes they are about keeping watch. Ash Valley is difficult to describe to someone who has never breathed its air. From a distance, it looks almost empty. A long hollow between dark mountains, pale at the edges, as if the land has been brushed with gray powder. Travelers who pass the outer ridge often think there is little here besides stone, smoke, and silence. They see the ash fields lying flat beneath the sky. They see the black mouths of old caves. They see thin lines of warm light from the shelters after sunset, and they assume the valley is sleeping. But Ash Valley is never completely asleep. Even in the deepest hours of night, something is always shifting. A low ember under a stone, a slow wing beneath a roof, a breath moving through a stall. Ash sliding down a cliff face in a soft, dry whisper. Water settling in the troughs after a dragon drinks. The valley does not make much noise, but it is never without sound. The mountains hold those sounds in. In other places, a noise escapes. A door closes, a branch breaks, an animal calls, and then the sound travels away until it is gone. But here, sound stays close. The ridges catch it. The cave walls return it. Even a quiet footstep may come back to you a moment later, softened by stone and ash, as though the valley is repeating it under its breath. Because of that, people in Ash Valley learn to move carefully. Not because we are afraid of waking the mountains. That is something outsiders say, and it sounds foolish to us. Mountains do not wake, but the creatures who sleep inside them do. And a young dragon, woken suddenly in a place where every sound comes back doubled, may startle at its own fear. So the valley teaches quietness. It teaches you to set a cup down with 2 fingers. It teaches you to close a gate from the hinge side, not the latch side. It teaches you to step over a loose chain, never through it. It teaches you to wait for the wind before crossing an open yard with a bucket, because the wind will hide the sound of the water moving. No one here tries to keep completely clean. The lower shelter is one of the last lights before the eastern path disappears into the older part of the valley. Inside the lower shelter, the world becomes even smaller and more detailed. The main hall is long and curved, built to follow the shape of the ridge behind it. The roof slopes low on the northern side and rises toward the south, where the vents are set. When the vents are open, smoke leaves in thin blue threads. When they are closed, the air becomes heavy with warmth and the smell of scales. Each stall is different, though they were built from the same plan. The dragons changed them by living in them. One has claw marks along the left wall from a young one that scratched in its sleep. One has a polished stone corner where a shy green-scaled dragon rubbed its cheek every night for almost 3 months. One has a dark patch on the floor where blue flame once slipped from a dream and left the stone smooth as glass. We do not repair every mark. Some marks are damage, some are records. My own favorite place is the narrow passage between the main hall and the north door. It is not beautiful. There are hooks on one wall, ash brooms on the other, and a shelf where we keep folded cloths for wiping smoke from the eyes of the younger dragons. The floor is always a little colder there because the door does not seal perfectly. In winter, a line of pale ash gathers beneath it no matter how often I sweep. But from that passage, if the inner lamps are low enough, I can see both worlds at once. Behind me, the shelter, warm stone, slow breathing, lamps, water, the heavy sleep of wing bodies. Ahead of me, through the crack beneath the door and the thin gaps around the frame, the valley at night, wide and gray, with the mountains watching in silence. That to me is what Ash Valley feels like from the inside. Not grand, not empty, not safe in the way a locked room is safe. It is a place of careful nearness. The mountain's near, the dragon's near, the old fire's near, the past near. Even sleep, when it comes, does not seem far away. It moves slowly through the shelter, stall by stall, breath by breath, lamp by lamp, until at last even the restless ones lower their heads. And when the whole hall settles, there is a sound that few outsiders ever hear. Not silence, a layered hush. The kind made by warm stone, folded wings, low lamps, cooling metal, distant ash, and creatures large enough to frighten kingdoms sleeping as gently as children. My night usually begins before the valley has gone completely dark. There is a brief hour when the sky is neither day nor night, when the ash in the air turns the color of old copper and the ridgelines seem softer than they are. During that hour, the daykeepers finish their last work without speaking much. They count the feed bowls, rinse the brushes, fold the heat cloths, and leave their notes on the flat stone table near the south wall. The notes are never long. A young red-winged dragon drank late. The third stall needs fresh ash herb. The blue flame one dreamed heavily at noon. The north hinge should be watched if the wind turns. Such things are enough. By the time I arrive, the shelter has already begun to change its breathing. Daylight makes every place show its edges. At night, the edges soften. The corners of the stalls deepen. The water in the troughs reflects less. The dragons grow quieter, though not always calmer. There is a difference. Quiet is only the absence of noise. Calm is when the whole body has agreed to rest. Now I lift the latch, wait a breath, and open the door with my shoulder. The first thing I do is stand still. Not for long. Just long enough to let the shelter know the night has changed hands. It may sound strange to say that a place knows who has entered, but the lower shelter does. Perhaps not in the way a person knows, but every night has a different weight, depending on who is moving through it. The dragons know footsteps. The boards know habits. The hanging chains know whether the hand that passes them is careful. So I stand in the entryway and breathe slowly until my own breath has found the pace of the hall. Only then do I begin. The western lamps are first, so I wait near the fourth lamp, counting the dragon's breaths. 1, 2, 3. A soft pull of air through the nostrils. A pause. The faintest glow beneath the lower jaw. Then the breath leaves again, slow and even, carrying the smell of rain on hot stone. Good. I lower the lamp. After the western lamps, I check the water. This is more delicate than outsiders, imagine. They think water is simply water, and that a thirsty creature will drink if a trough is full. But young dragons are not so simple. Some dislike seeing the surface move. Some dislike the smell of fresh water until it has touched stone for a while. Some will not drink from a trough that reflects their own eyes. A few will only drink after the lamps have been dimmed, when the surface turns dark enough to seem deep. That is why we fill most troughs before full night, then return later to break the reflection. I carry a flat ashwood paddle for this. I place it gently on the surface of each trough and draw it once from side to side. Not enough to stir the water. Only enough to blur what the dragons might see if they wake and look down. Ash herb has a smell that is hard to describe. Dry, it smells like bitter leaves and cold smoke. Wet, it smells almost sweet, like rainwater left in a stone bowl. Dragons do not eat it. They breathe over it, mostly. The herb changes the sharpness of the water, and the steam that rises from it settles the throat. A young dragon with a settled throat sleeps more deeply. A keeper with sleeping dragons has a kinder night. After the water comes the floor. I kneel beside each sleeping place and set my palm flat against the stone. Too hot, and the dragon will shift all night, curling and uncurling. Too cool, and the wings draw in too tightly. The right warmth is like bread wrapped in cloth. Not burning, not fading. A steady gentleness held inside the stone. The youngest dragons prefer more heat than they need. That is often true of the young in any form. Give them too much comfort, and they wake restless from it. So I adjust the vents one by one with the iron key that hangs from my belt. The key is old and heavy. Its handle is shaped like a folded wing, worn smooth where many keepers have held it. It opens nothing that a thief would want. Only vents, ash grates, and the small doors beneath the heatstones. Still, I have never liked being without it. The weight of it at my side tells me the shelter can be answered if it asks for something. By then, full night has usually reached the outer yard. The daykeepers leave in 2s or 3s. They do not call goodbye from the door. They raise a hand if I am looking, and if I am not, they let the night take them quietly. Their boots cross the yard, the ash shifts, the side gate opens. and then the shelter belongs to those who sleep and the one who watches. That is when I make the first round. A round is not a patrol. Patrol is a word used by guards and soldiers, and there are no soldiers in the lower shelter. A round is more like making sure a song has not lost its rhythm. I walk the main path from south to north, then return by the narrow wall side, where the hooks and shelves are. I look at each stall without staring. I listen without leaning too close. I count what needs counting. Bowls, lamps, visible wingtips, tail placement, breath pace, floor warmth, ash drift, chain slack, door shadows. Once the first round is finished, I write the beginning mark in the night ledger. We do not write stories in it, only marks. A line for water, a dot for lamps, a curve for steady sleep, a small cross if a dragon refuses rest, a circle if the reason is known, an open circle if it is not. Many nights begin with simple marks. Water settled, lamps lowered, heat stone steady, breathing even. On such nights, the shelter seems almost to drift. The ash outside gathers against the walls. The moon, if there is one, paints the yard in a thin color like bone. Somewhere beyond the ridge, older dragons shift in the upper caverns, and the sound arrives late, softened by distance. I sit then on the low stool by the west wall, the one with the uneven leg, and mend whatever has been left for me. A strap, a cloth tie, a cracked feeding scoop, a brush handle. Small work keeps the hands quiet without making the mind dull. That is how an ordinary night begins in the lower shelter. Not with danger, not with flame, but with 100 small adjustments, each one almost too simple to mention, and each one important enough to do carefully. After the night has properly begun, the shelter settles into its deeper routines. These are not written in any full list. No one could keep such a list complete. Every dragon changes a place by living in it, and every season changes what the place asks from its keepers. Still, there are tasks that return so often they become part of the body. The hands remember them before the mind names them. First, I prepare the ash cloths. They are kept folded in a long cedar box near the north passage. Each cloth is woven thick, then rubbed with fine gray ash until it softens. A new cloth is too eager. It catches on scale edges. It pulls out loose flakes. It makes the young ones twitch. A proper ash cloth has been washed, dried, rubbed, folded, warmed, and used enough times that it no longer announces itself. Most dragons do not need touching, but sometimes a young one sleeps with smoke drying at the corners of its eyes, or with ash gathered along the folds of its nose, or with a loose scale lifting near the jaw. If such things are handled gently enough, the dragon may never wake at all. That is always best. To clean a sleeping dragon's eye ridge, you do not wipe straight across. You follow the direction of the small scales, moving outward, never inward. You pause after each pass. You let the dragon breathe. You do not hold your own breath, because they feel that. A keeper holding breath feels like a creature waiting to run. Dragons dislike that. When the ash cloths are ready, I check the brush rack. There are long-handled back brushes, curved for reaching beneath folded wings. Copper thread brushes for old scale dust. River reed brushes for the tender places behind the horns. Flat palm brushes for the warm plates along the throat. Little narrow brushes used only for the claw beds of young dragons who still curl their feet too tightly while sleeping. Each brush has its own hook. Each hook has its own shadow. So I keep the hooks as they have always been kept. Some routines exist only to prevent one unnecessary sound. After the brushes, I visit the ember room. At the center of the ember room is the banked fire. We do not build it high at night. A high fire has opinions. It cracks, spits, brightens, demands tending. A banked fire knows its work. It holds itself low under ash and keeps the channels breathing. I open the small vent doors with the wing-handled key and listen. The ember room is where a keeper learns that warmth is not one thing. Another routine belongs to the quiet objects. If one of these things is moved, most people would not notice. The dragons notice. So I count the quiet objects: stool, buckets, rope, broom, jar, ring. The breath bells hang in a row above the main passage, small and dark, each tuned to a different pitch. They are not made for music. Their metal is thin, hammered from old scale bronze and ash iron. When the air in the hall changes suddenly, they tremble. When a dragon's breath grows too hot, or too fast, or uneven in a way that moves pressure through the stalls, one or two of them may sound. A good night, they remain silent. A very good night, They almost sound but do not. That means the hall is alive but settled. I stand beneath them after the second round and wait for a while. So I listen for the second sign. A claw shifting, a tail tightening, a nostril flare, a change in the color of smoke. Only then do I move. The color matters, but not as much as outsiders think. But shape matters more. During the night, the stones cool unevenly. So I turn them. Doors matter in Ash Valley. Not because they keep danger out. A determined dragon can break most doors if it truly wishes to. Doors matter because they tell the air how to enter. Every night, I touch each door. Not open, not close, touch. At the north door, I always wait. That door faces the old migration path. The young dragons do not know the path in the way a map knows a line. Many have never flown beyond the valley. Some were hatched here. Some were brought injured, or orphaned, or too weak to travel with their kind. And yet, on certain nights, when the wind moves down from the northern passes, they turn toward that door in their sleep. A keeper learns not to call this sadness too quickly. Longing, perhaps. Memory, perhaps. Or only the body remembering a direction older than thought. Whatever it is, I give the north door its time. Near the middle of the night, when the first part of sleep has deepened and the second has not yet begun, I make tea. Not because I need it, though I often do. The tea is part of the shelter's rhythm. The kettle is small, blackened, and quiet if placed correctly. The cup is clay, the leaves are bitter. I sit near the west wall, where the stool waits, and pour slowly. The tea has smoke leaf, ash, mint, and a shaving of dried ember root. It smells like warmth settling into earth. When the steam rises, some of the younger dragons breathe more evenly. Perhaps the smell reminds them that the watcher is still awake. Perhaps it means nothing at all, and I only tell myself stories while sitting with a cup between my hands. And sometimes that is reason enough. People from outside the valley often arrive expecting the shelter to prove what they already believe. They notice the size of the doors, the scorch marks on the stone, the chains hanging from the rafters, the long iron hooks, the ash masks by the entrance, and the deep claw grooves across the outer yard. They see these things and grow careful in a way that has more to do with stories than with sense. I do not blame them. If I had come from a place where dragons lived only in songs, perhaps I would look at the shelter in the same way. I might imagine that every mark was made in violence, that every hook was for holding something back, that every door was built to stop a monster from reaching the world outside. But most of the marks in the lower shelter were made by ordinary needs. A claw groove near a trough usually means a dragon stretched while drinking. A dark line across the wall may be from a tail brushing soot from a lamp niche. A cracked stone by the south stall came from a young one rolling over in its sleep and pressing one shoulder too hard against the floor. The long chains are not for punishment. Most are used to raise warm cloth screens, hang drying harnesses, or steady the larger troughs during ash winds. If visitors stay long enough, the first thing that surprises them is not danger. It is the stillness. They expect roaring. They expect flame. They expect a keeper to shout commands and strike the floor with a staff. Instead, they see someone sorting brushes by handle length, warming cloths, checking water, mending a strap by lamplight, and waiting 10 minutes for a dragon to decide whether it wants to move its wing. Waiting is difficult for people who arrive with fear inside them. They want each moment to prove the stories they carry. Then, little by little, if the valley is patient with them, they begin to notice the other things. The way we do not use names aloud in the night hours unless we must. The way a dragon may accept care and then turn away without offering any sign of gratitude. The way most of the shelter has been built not around control, but around sleep. A growing dragon sleeps heavily, unevenly, and often. Its bones lengthen in sleep. Its wing joints soften and strengthen. Its throat stones cool and settle. Its fire learns its own boundaries. A young dragon deprived of proper rest becomes sharp in the eyes and uncertain in the body. It startles at echoes, it bites at heat. It forgets the difference between a threat and an interruption. So the shelter is arranged around sleep. The lamps, the stones, the troughs, the cloths, the bells, the distance between stalls, the curve of the roof, the way the main path bends slightly so no one walking through the hall creates a straight line of sound. Outsiders often think we are guarding dragons from the world. Some nights, I think we are guarding sleep from everything that would disturb it It takes them longer to understand the tenderness. They see a young dragon press its cheek against a warm post because the wood remembers the sun. They see another refuse to sleep until the cracked broom is back in its corner. They see one tuck a sleep stone under its wing with the carefulness of a child hiding a treasure. They see great claws relax one by one when the lamps are turned low enough. And they do not know where to put these things inside their stories. People prefer their powerful creatures simple. A monster can be slain, a weapon can be used, a symbol can be raised on a banner. But a living thing that is powerful and tired, dangerous and young, ancient in its blood, and frightened of its own reflection that is harder to hold in the mind. Ash Valley is full of such difficulty. We live with it until it becomes ordinary. Not less wondrous, only ordinary. There is a difference. Beyond Ash Valley, the world is not always quiet. There are kingdoms beyond the ridges that still speak of dragons as if they are banners with wings. There are houses of war that keep old saddles in locked rooms, polished, though no living dragon would wear them. There are lords who pay scholars to study egg patterns, hoping to predict strength before a shell has even opened. There are cities that have never cared for a dragon through fever, yet still carve them above their gates as symbols of power. Ash Valley knows these things. We do not speak of them often in the lower shelter, but we know. And still, in the lower shelter, the water must be carried. The lamps must be lowered. The heat stones must be turned. A young dragon with a sore wing does not sleep more easily because distant rulers have begun arguing again. A blue flame throat does not cool properly because a border has shifted on someone's map. The ash does not stop entering under the north door because people beyond the valley have remembered old ambitions. Large events do not always arrive loudly where they are felt. There was a winter, some years ago, when the northern cities began buying stories. That is how it started. Not eggs, not scales, not routes, stories. At first, many thought it harmless. A story is only a story, people said. The council told the villages to stop selling memories. Some listened. Some had already sold too much. So we changed our routines. Not greatly. Great changes disturb dragons more than they reassure them. That is how Ash Valley endures pressure from the outside. Not by pretending it is not there. Not by letting it enter every room. By holding the shape of ordinary care as steadily as possible. There are many kinds of large events. Some come from kings, some from mountains, some from weather, some from hunger, fear, memory, or old mistakes that finally arrive at the door. The lower shelter cannot prevent most of them. It is not built for preventing the world. It is built for receiving what the world sends us and keeping it alive through the night. We receive these things in the same way, as much as we can, slowly, with both hands, without making more noise than needed. That is why the routines matter when the world beyond the shelter is unsettled. Routine is not ignorance. It is a kind of shelter within the shelter. When people outside argue over what dragons mean, we return to what dragons need. When old stories are sharpened into claims, we soften cloths. When rulers remember power, we remember water. When the roads become uncertain, we sweep the ash from the thresholds so the young ones do not wake to a changed shape. The longer you live in Ash Valley, the more you learn that most useful knowledge arrives too quietly to be noticed at first. No one hands it to you complete. You may remember a rule when it is given to you, but the true understanding may come years later, while you are kneeling beside a sleeping dragon with a warm cloth in your hand, realizing why an old keeper once told you never to stand between a restless creature and an open door. At the time, it may have sounded like a rule. Later, you learn it is a kindness. A creature that can see a way out does not always need to use it. Sometimes it only needs to know the way remains there. If you block the door, even by accident, the body begins making decisions before the mind has time to soften them. Wings tighten, claws draw in, the throat warms, the eyes open wider than they should. So you stand to the side. Give every frightened thing a path it does not have to take. There are many such skills in the lower shelter, and most of them look like nothing from the outside. These things sound small because they are small. But a night is built from them. Those are only the visible parts. Each thing alone is almost nothing. Together, they make a shape the dragons feel before we see it. So a good keeper learns to read the shape of almost nothing. That may be the whole art. There are rules for smoke and eyes, though they are rarely written down. Smoke should never be waved away from a sleeping dragon's face. The motion of a hand may trouble it more than the smoke itself. A keeper changes the air behind them instead, opening a vent or shifting the body so the draft does the work quietly. If a dragon wakes and looks with both eyes, you lower your gaze without looking away completely. Looking away too fast belongs to fear. Staring belongs to challenge. A lowered gaze says, I am here, and I do not need to win. A young keeper listens for loud things. An older keeper listens for missing things. The trough that should drip but does not. The bell that always trembles during north wind but stays still. The dragon that usually exhales smoke after turning, but tonight exhales nothing. Absence is one of the harder languages of the shelter. It takes years to hear what is not there. If a dragon is afraid, do not hurry to comfort it. This is the hardest lesson for many people. They see fear and want to cover it with touch, voice, promise, closeness. But fear sometimes needs room before it can receive comfort. A dragon with fear in its body is not empty. It is full. Too full. If you add yourself too quickly, even kindly, you become one more thing inside the fear. So you sit nearby. You let the creature hear your breath. You let the lamp remain low. You keep the exit clear. You do not fill the silence with yourself. Eventually, if the fear begins to loosen, the dragon may turn toward you. Or it may not. Both can be well. After many years in the lower shelter, I have come to believe that attention is a form of shelter too. It covers nothing. It locks nothing away. It simply rests around a living thing and says, I will notice if you change. That is often more comfort than people realize. The night I remember most clearly did not begin as a difficult night. That is often how memorable nights arrive in the lower shelter. Not with warning. Not with a bell ringing hard against its hook or a flame leaping where no flame should be. They begin plainly, almost kindly, as if they do not want to draw attention to themselves too soon. The western lamps lowered without trouble. The blue flame young one breathed steadily through the first count, and its throat glow remained low and soft beneath the jaw. The water in the troughs had settled before I arrived. The ash herbs sank cleanly. The heat stones were even under my palm. The valley outside was cold, but not restless. A thin fall of ash moved through the yard, coming down straight and slow, which usually means a gentle night. The north wind had not risen. The breath bells were almost silent. Even the smallest bell, the one that trembles at the edge of speaking, held still. I remember thinking that the shelter had accepted the night early. That can be a dangerous thought, not because it brings bad luck, but because it tempts a keeper to stop listening carefully. Still, for a while, all was well. The young dragons settled one by one. The fifth stall gave its usual little hooks of smoke before midnight, dreaming of climbing as it often did. The blue flame one shifted once, then tucked its head beneath the edge of one wing. The young one with the cracked left horn slept deeply enough that I warmed a cloth and cleaned ash from the horn ridge without opening its eyes. Near the north end of the hall, in the last stall before the passage, the youngest dragon lay on its heat stones with its tail curled close and its chin resting on the floor. Most nights, it was the first to sleep. That night, it did not sleep. At first, I did not think much of it. Young dragons have uneven nights, just as young humans do. A change in the weather, a strange smell on a cloth, too much warmth in a stone, too little mineral salt in the water, any small thing can keep the body from settling. I made a note in my mind to check the stall on my next round, then continued with the tasks already in my hands. But when I returned, the dragon was still awake. Not moving. Not pacing. Not distressed in any obvious way. Only awake. Its eyes were open and dark, reflecting the low lamps. Its head remained on the stone. Its wings were folded neatly along its sides. The tail was not tight with fear. The claws were loose. The breath came slowly, evenly, with no catch in the throat. I stood near the stall post and listened. Sometimes a dragon can look calm while its breath tells the truth. This one's breath told me very little. No fever heat, no sharpness, no smoke falling low, no broken rhythm. A quiet pull inward, a pause, a warm release carrying only a pale thread of gray. I checked the water. The surface was dark and blurred, as it should be, no reflection waiting there to trouble it. I checked the stones. The warmth was right. I checked the lamp. Low enough. I checked the door shadow. Soft enough. I checked the chain hook on the outer post. Still. There are nights when you find the answer quickly. A stone too hot, a hinge tapping, water too clear, smoke in the eyes, a rough edge on a strap. Those nights are kind in their own way, because a problem with a shape can often be answered by hands. This was not that kind of night. The dragon remained awake. I continued the round, because a keeper must not give all attention to one stall too quickly. The other dragons feel imbalanced in the hall. If one creature receives too much focus, the knight leans toward it, and the leaning itself can become a disturbance. So I walked the full path, south to north, north to west, west wall to ember room back to the main hall. All the while, I listened for the last stall. Nothing changed. The young dragon did not call. It did not rise. It did not scratch the floor or turn its head toward the lamps. It only looked toward the north passage, where the narrow hall led to the old door. Not the yard door. Not the door used for carts or keepers or deliveries. The north door. It is the oldest door in the lower shelter, older than the current roof, older than the second row of stalls, older than the stone table where the night ledger rests. The wood has been repaired many times, but the frame is original, set deep into the ridge rock. Beyond it is a narrow outer path that climbs toward the old migration trail. We do not use it often. In winter, ash drifts high against it. In summer, weeds grow between the outer stones. It opens stiffly, and only after the lower brace is lifted by hand. The young dragons often turn toward it in their sleep. This one was awake and looking. That was different. I went to the north passage and stood beside the door. The air there was colder, as usual. A thin line of ash had gathered beneath the threshold. I crouched and touched it. Dry, soft, ordinary. No sudden draft. No scent from outside except cold stone and the faint mineral bitterness of night ash. I placed my palm against the door. Wood, cold near the bottom. Iron brace, steady. Hinge, quiet. Beyond the door, the valley held still. When I looked back, the youngest dragon was watching me. Not in fear. Not in expectation. Only watching. There are moments in the shelter when doing less is the only useful thing left. I had checked what could be checked. The water was good, the stones were good, the lamps were good, the air was not wrong, the dragon's breath was even. If I kept searching for a cause, I would become the disturbance. So I took the low stool from the west wall and carried it quietly to the north passage. I placed it near the door, but not in front of it. Never between a restless creature and an opening. Then I sat down. For a long time, nothing happened. The hall behind us continued its sleeping work. A dragon in the middle stalls turned slowly, and the straw beneath its shoulder whispered. The ember channels knocked once, then settled. One of the breath bells moved without sound. The lamps held their small flames. Outside, ash brushed lightly against the door. I kept my hands folded. When sitting with a wakeful dragon, it is important not to look as if you are waiting for a performance. Dragons dislike being studied. Most living things do. So I let my gaze rest on the floor between us, on the line where warm hall light thinned into the colder shadow of the passage. The youngest dragon breathed. I breathed. The shelter breathed around us. After some time, the dragon lifted its head. Only a little. The movement was slow, uncertain, not weak, but careful, as if it did not wish to disturb whatever it was listening to. Its nostrils widened. A faint smoke thread slipped out and drifted not upward, but toward the north door. That made me sit straighter. Smoke does not often move against still air. I did not rise. I only turned my head slightly and watched the smoke thin near the threshold. Another breath. Again, the smoke leaned toward the door. Not pulled hard, not taken by wind, drawn, perhaps, by something too soft for my skin to feel. I whispered then, not to the dragon, not exactly, but to the room. I see it. That is sometimes all a keeper can offer. Not an answer. Only witness. The dragon's eyes half closed, then open again. It drew its foreclaws closer and shifted its chin from the warm stone to the cooler floor. That told me the heat was no longer the question. Comfort was not the question. The north was... I remembered then what the egg watchers sometimes say. A young dragon does not always know what it remembers. Some memories belong to the body before they belong to the mind. A wing knows lift before the creature understands the sky. A throat knows heat before it understands flame. A sleeping body may turn toward a path it has never taken, because somewhere inside it, the path is older than experience. I wondered whether that was what held the youngest dragon awake. Not fear, not illness, not discomfort, a direction. The idea came quietly, and I did not trust it at once. Keepers must be careful with beautiful explanations. They can make a person careless. It is easy to turn uncertainty into a story simply because the story feels kind, so I returned to what could be known. The dragon was awake. It was calm. It was looking north. Its smoke leaned toward the door. It did not need food, water, heat, or touch. Therefore, I stayed. The middle of the night passed around us. At some point, I rose long enough to make another round, slowly, without hurry, without making the young dragon feel abandoned. I checked the lamps, the water, the stones, the bells. I warmed a cloth I did not use. I turned 2 sleep stones near the 5th stall. I closed 1 ember vent by half a finger's width. Then I returned to the stool by the north passage. The youngest dragon had not moved, but its smoke had changed. It was no longer gray. At first, I thought the low light had colored it. I lifted the shaded lamp a little, only enough to see, and watched the next breath leave its nostrils. The smoke was pale gold. Not bright, not alarming. Only a faint golden thread, barely visible in the dim passage, moving from the dragon's nose toward the bottom of the north door. Gold smoke is rare in the lower shelter. It belongs to deep memory, or so the old keepers say. I have seen it only a few times. Once when an older dragon heard the first thunder of spring after a long fever. Once when a young wing healed enough to stretch fully in sleep. Once when a dragon brought down from the upper caverns spent its final night in the lower hall because it did not want to be alone. Gold smoke comes when something inside the body recognizes something it cannot reach. That is the best way I can say it. The young dragon exhaled again. Gold. Thin. Steady. The smoke touched the line of ash beneath the door, and the ash stirred. Not much. Only enough to make a small shape in the dust. A curve, then a break, then another curve. If someone had been standing over my shoulder, they might have said it was nothing. A draft. A trick of breath and powder. A keeper's tired eyes arranging chance into meaning. Perhaps. But I had been watching ash for many years, and the shape it made was the first bend of the old migration path. Not a map. Not fully. Only the beginning. The place where the trail leaves the north ridge and turns between the 2 black stones. The young dragon had never seen it. At least, not with waking eyes. I did not touch the ash. I did not call anyone. Some moments become smaller when witnessed by too many people. Instead, I lowered the lamp again and sat very still. The dragon watched the ash beneath the door. The ash did not move further. Perhaps it had shown all it would show. Perhaps the breath had shaped only what the dragon already carried in itself. Perhaps the valley, which is older than our explanations, had leaned close for a moment and then leaned away. The dragon let out a sound then. Not a cry. Not a growl. A low, rough note from deep in the chest, so soft that the breath bells did not answer it. The kind of sound a creature makes when it is not asking, not refusing, not calling, only feeling the size of something inside itself. I felt it in the floor. Then, from the far end of the hall, another dragon answered in sleep. Only a murmur, then another. The sound did not wake the shelter. It moved through it like warmth through stone. A few wings shifted. One tail loosened. The blue flame throat glowed faintly, then dimmed. The young dragon in front of me closed its eyes halfway. For the first time that night, it looked tired. I wanted to help. That was the danger of the moment. Wanting to help too much. I could have warmed a cloth. I could have brought a sleep stone. I could have whispered. I could have touched the stall post. I could have opened the north door a little, just enough to let in the night air from the old path. I did none of those things. The door was not mine to open for a memory. The dragon had not asked, so I only sat. The golden smoke faded slowly over the next several breaths. Gray returned, soft and ordinary. The line of ash beneath the door lost its shape when a small draft moved under the frame. The hall settled again, though not into the same quiet as before. It felt fuller now, as if something had passed through and left no mark except the knowledge that it had been there. The youngest dragon lowered its head. Not to the warm stone, to the threshold. It stretched its neck until its chin rested just inside the north passage, close enough to feel the coolness coming from beneath the door. Its body remained in the stall, curled and safe. Its head lay toward the old path. I understood then, or thought I did. It did not want to leave. It wanted the nearness of leaving. It wanted to sleep with the direction beside it. There are many forms of rest. Some creatures rest best in the center of a room, some beside warmth, some beneath a roof, some with another body close, some with an open space nearby. Some need to know where the road begins, even if they are not ready to take it. So I moved the low lamp. Not much, only a little closer to the passage, turned toward the wall so its light would not touch the dragon's eyes. Then I took one of the unused ash cloths from my arm, folded it twice, and placed it on the cold floor near the threshold, not under the dragon's head, only beside it. An offering of softness. The dragon opened one eye, looked at the cloth, looked at me, then closed the eye again. I took that for permission to remain. Hours passed that way. I made rounds when needed. I returned. I drank tea that had gone bitter and cold. I wrote one open circle in the ledger, then hesitated and added a small north mark beside it. I had never written that mark before. I am not sure anyone had, but the page accepted it. Near dawn, the ash outside stopped falling. The change was immediate, though silent. The air beyond the door lightened. The weight against the walls eased. Somewhere far up the ridge, a stone released its night cold with a faint crack. The breath bells gave one small tremble altogether, then stilled. The youngest dragon slept. Not deeply, perhaps, but truly. Its head rested near the threshold, one foreclaw curled around the folded ash cloth, smoke rising in a smooth gray ribbon from both nostrils. The body had relaxed fully at last. The tail loosened. The wing joints softened. The throat glow dimmed to the steady warmth of ordinary sleep. I watched the young dragon sleep beside the old door, and I thought of all the things a body can carry without understanding them. Roads, skies, voices, the shape of mountains never seen. The warmth of a creature no longer there, the pull of a direction, the need to rest near the beginning of a path. When the daykeepers arrived, I did not tell the story fully. Not then. I marked the ledger. Water steady. Lamps low. North door watched. Youngest one slept near threshold. Gold smoke before dawn. The daykeeper who read the page looked at me for a long moment, then, without asking a question, placed one finger beside the north mark and nodded. That was enough? Some nights do not need explaining before breakfast. After that night, the lower shelter did not change all at once. Important changes rarely happen that way in Ash Valley. If something is changed too quickly, even for a good reason, the hall notices. The dragons notice. The lamps seem to burn differently. The water sounds wrong in its troughs. The shadows lean in unfamiliar directions. So he changed almost nothing. Almost. The folded ash cloth remained near the north passage, placed carefully beside the wall where it did not block the path. The low lamp was turned a little more toward the stone on cold nights, so its light softened before reaching the threshold. The line of ash beneath the door was swept less completely, not left dirty, but not made bare either. A little ash gives the wind something quiet to touch. The youngest dragon noticed. Of course it did. It noticed the cloth without looking directly at it. It noticed the lamp, by the way its eyes did not tighten when the flame was lowered. It noticed the threshold by resting its chin there earlier each night, as if the place had been waiting and now no longer needed to call so strongly. Within a few evenings, this became part of the shelter. That is how many things become tradition in Ash Valley. Not by decree. Not because an elder says, from now on it will be so. A creature needs something. A keeper notices. The need returns. The answer remains. And after enough nights, everyone behaves as though the valley itself has always known. The young dragon did not sleep at the north passage every night. That would have been too simple. Some nights it returned to the center of its heat stones. Some nights it curled near the trough, especially when rain came down the eastern slopes and the water smelled new. Once, during a warm ashfall, it slept with its nose tucked beneath one wing and ignored the north door completely. That pleased me. A comfort that becomes a cage is not comfort. The point was not to give it one proper way to rest. The point was to let the shelter offer more than one kind of safety. Over time, the other keepers learned the adjustment without needing a full story. The daykeepers left the cloth in place. The herb keeper stopped storing jars too close to the north passage. One of the younger keepers almost moved the low stool back to the west wall, then saw the mark in the ledger and thought better of it. The carpenter smoothed the bottom edge of the door so ash would gather in a softer line. No one made a ceremony of it. The shelter simply widened a little. I think often of that. how a place can widen without becoming larger. But something in the hall had settled. Or perhaps something in me had. So I returned to the ordinary nights with as much care as I could. I lowered the lamps, I checked the troughs, I warmed the cloths, I turned the stones, I touched each door. I stood beneath the breath bells and listened for the almost sound. I drank bitter tea near the west wall. I mended straps. I brushed ash from the quiet objects so their shapes remained known. And sometimes, while I worked, I would notice the youngest dragon asleep near the north passage. Not always. Only sometimes. Its breath would move gray and steady along the floor. One claw might rest on the folded ash cloth. Its head would be turned just enough to feel the coolness beneath the door. The rest of its body remained in the warm stall, safe among the familiar stones. Between warmth and distance, between shelter and path, between where it was and where some older part of it remembered going, that became one of the gentle facts of the lower shelter, the sort of fact no visitor would notice, the sort that matters anyway. Seasons turned. Through it all, the north passage remained changed by a folded cloth and a slightly warmer lamp. The youngest dragon grew, as young dragons do, but it kept the habit of the north door. Not every night, not from fear. After the gold smoke night, I became more careful with the places near doors. Not only the north door, all doors. I noticed how often young creatures sleep better when they can feel an edge of the world nearby. A stall with too much enclosure may warm the body but crowd the mind. A fully open space may calm one dragon and unsettle another. Some need the corner, some need the middle, some need the sound of water, some need the absence of it, some need to smell ash. Some need old wood, some need the smallest possible view of the sky. Before that night, I thought of shelter mostly as protection. Afterward, I began to think of shelter as permission. Permission to sleep near a door. Permission to turn away from the lamp. Permission to keep a useless broom in a corner because its shadow is familiar. Permission to need what does not appear sensible at first. This is not only true of dragons, though perhaps dragons make it easier to see. I do not know how long an account like this should be. In Ash Valley, we are not practiced in telling our nights from beginning to end. Most of what matters happens in pieces too small to seem worth arranging. A lamp turned lower. A warm cloth folded again. A breath heard before it becomes a problem. A door touched in passing. A creature left undisturbed because disturbance would have been easier than patience. If I were asked what the lower shelter is, I could answer in many ways. A building beneath the eastern ridge. A place for young dragons between nursery, fire, and upper cavern. A hall of warm stones, low lamps, breath bells, ash herbs, water troughs, old tools, careful doors, and routines that look almost like nothing until one of them is forgotten. All of that would be true. But after enough nights, a place becomes more than the things inside it. The lower shelter is a way of listening. It is a way of believing that sleep is worth protecting, even when the sleeper is large enough to frighten a kingdom. It is a way of knowing that strength does not remove the need for care. It is a way of standing near something powerful without asking it to become simple. I think that is why I have stayed. Not because the work is easy. It is not. There are nights when I am tired enough to resent the next small task. Then the task becomes simple in my hands, and the resentment passes. A cloth needs warming. A lamp needs lowering. A stone needs turning. A dragon needs nothing more than for me to sit nearby and not ask anything of it. Such work teaches a person to return. Perhaps that is all care really is, when stripped of the grand words people give it. Returning. The youngest dragon still sleeps near the north passage when the air grows still. Not every night. I am glad of that. But on certain cold nights, when the ash falls straight and the mountains seem to lean close, it rests by the old threshold. The folded cloth is still there. The lamp remains turned toward the stone. The ash beneath the door is swept lightly, never bare. I think of the old migration path less as a road now and more as a question. Not a question that needs answering quickly. Only one that remains. When dawn approaches, the lower shelter changes again. The first sign is not light. Light comes late into the valley, delayed by ridges and ash. The first sign is the cooling of the outer stones, then the slight thinning of smoke near the vents. Then the way the dragon's breathing shifts, not waking yet, but moving closer to the surface of sleep. A sleeping hall before dawn is one of the gentlest things I know. The lamps are almost spent, Their flames bend low inside the glass, amber and small. The floor holds the last warmth of night. The air smells of ash herb, old smoke, wet stone, and the faint mineral sweetness that rises from cooling scales. The breath bells hang still, dark against the rafters. Water lies black and quiet in the troughs. Outside, the valley begins to turn gray. Not bright. Never bright all at once. On such mornings, before the daykeepers arrive, I walk the final round more slowly than the others. I check the western lamps and let 2 of them go out. I leave the third burning low until the first daykeeper comes, because its shadow has become part of the hall's waking. I touch the trough rims. I count the brushes. I close the smallest ember vent and leave the wider one breathing. I mark the ledger in the simplest way I can. Water steady, heat good, north door quiet, all resting. Some mornings, that is all a night leaves behind. A few marks, a tired hand, a hall full of sleeping dragons, and that is enough. If this account has reached you, wherever your night may be, then perhaps it has carried a little of the lower shelter with it, not the whole place. No account can carry the whole of a place, but perhaps enough. A low lamp, a warm stone, a quiet door, a breath that slows because someone nearby is listening. A young dragon sleeping with its head turned toward a path it does not need to take tonight, and a keeper sitting close enough to notice, far enough not to disturb, waiting while the valley moves from darkness into gray. That is the image I would leave with you. Not fire in the sky. Not wings over armies. Not the old stories told loudly in halls where no dragon could rest. Only this. A shelter beneath ash-covered mountains. The last hour before morning. The lamps almost out. The water still. The breath bells silent. The north door cool beneath one hand. And beyond it, unseen but present, the old path waiting quietly in the dark. That is where tonight's account comes to rest. Thank you for spending this time with me on Marlowe's Evening Radio. Somewhere in the night archives, another account is already waiting. Another world, another quiet place, another voice carried here from far away. I'll be here again to open it with you. Until then, let the night stay gentle around you. Rest well. Good night.